Lovely experience. It was years ago that I was here. We talked about what we were going to do, and we did just about everything we said. And if you'd like, we'll take a few questions, Bob.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Trump.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we're now moving, as promised, to the question and answer portion of the program. Our four very able questioners today are H. Rajan Cohen, the Senior Chair of Sullivan & Cromwell; Sandra Gerber, Founding and Managing Partner, CEO and CIO of Hudson Bay Capital; Mr. John Paulson, founder of Paulson & Company; and Rashma Sanjani, founder and CEO of Girls Who Code and Moms First. We're going to go in alphabetical order, and therefore, Raj, you have the first question.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I would like to ask about the United States economic sanctions programs. These programs have been used, as you well know, to advance our national security interests, our foreign policy objectives, but they also have economic implications. And the most recent was the program against Russia in response to their invasion of Ukraine, where for once we got the support of all our allies. So my specific question is, would you strengthen or modify any of these economic sanctions programs, particularly Russia, including the pipeline you mentioned?
Well, it's a great question. The problem with what we have with sanctions, and I was a user of sanctions, but I put them on and take them off as quickly as possible, because ultimately it kills your dollar and it kills everything the dollar represents, and we have to continue to have that be the world currency. I think it's important. I think it would be losing a war if we lost the dollar as the world currency. I think that would be the equivalent of losing a war. That would make us a third world country, and we can't let it happen. So I use sanctions very powerfully against countries that deserve it, and then I take them off. Because look, you're losing Iran, you're losing Russia. China is out there trying to get their currency to be the dominant currency, as you know better than anybody. All of these things are happening. You're losing so many countries because there's so much conflict with all of these countries that you're going to lose that, and we can't lose that. So I want to use sanctions as little as possible. One of the things that we have with tariffs is that I'll say to them, you don't honor the dollar as your world currency. Is that right? You're not going to do it? No, we're not. I said, that's okay. I'm going to put tariffs all over your product. And they're going to say, sir, we'd love to honor the dollar as the world currency. You know, tariffs, in addition to monetary and the money that we'll take in, which will be bigger than you've ever seen in this country before, gives you tremendous political power for something like that, as an example. I stopped wars with the threat of tariffs. I stopped wars with two countries that mattered a lot. A lot of people would have been killed. And I threatened tariffs coming into the United States if they don't make peace. And we made a lot of, we didn't have conflicts like you have right now. We had very intelligent people. But the biggest threat you have is you lose that currency, and we have lost something that you'll never get back. And we can keep it if we're smart, but they use it too much, and then they just forget about it. And these countries like Russia, it's going out now and doing its own thing, and you know, they're going out bragging about how they don't need us anymore, et cetera, et cetera. The sad part about Russia is that Ukraine would have never happened if I was president, so we wouldn't really have to be talking about sanctions. But it did happen. And one of the things I'm going to do, a little bit relevant to your question, is if we win, I believe I can settle that war while I'm president-elect. Before I ever get into office, I can get that war settled and get that war stopped, because it's a horrible, horrible war. And far more people are killed in Ukraine, far more people than you're realizing. They'll knock down this massive building, amazing, the size of these buildings, they'll knock it down. They'll say nobody was injured. No, a lot of people were killed. The real numbers are far greater than what people are looking at. So I think it's a very important thing. Sanctions have to be used very judiciously, and you can win. We have things much more powerful, actually, than sanctions. We have trade, but we cannot lose our dollar standard. Very important. Thank you very much.
Great. Sander?
Thank you, Mr. President, for all the details on your economic policy. As you alluded to, tariffs are the other side of sanctions. And given that China is our major trading partner with our largest imbalance and possibly our chief national security threat to the United States, how can we better institutionalize trade policy and national security policy to be coordinated?
So I had a great relationship with President Xi of China, really very close relationship. Now look, he likes China, I like us, but I don't want to sound foolish. He was my dear, dear friend. He's a tough guy, he's a fierce person. I say very smart. You know, when you say he's smart, the fake news goes crazy. He said President Xi is smart. And I say, yeah, well, he controls 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. He's smart. But we had a very good relationship with China until COVID. And when that came in, it was a whole different ballgame as far as I was concerned. You know, we made a great China trade deal, maybe better than the USMCA, and I'd never talk about it because what happened with COVID for the whole world, $60 trillion and, you know, deaths, 70 million, 60, nobody even knows how many deaths. And it all came out of Wuhan, so it changed my relationship. But I think I'll have a great relationship with China. I had one before, and they respected us, but they respected us because they no longer thought we were fools. They used to think we were fools because we built China. They would take over $500 billion a year and use it for their military and other things, and we got nothing out of that. We got some cheap product. You can buy 19 pencils instead of 2. Who the hell cares? You can buy 16 dolls for your daughter instead of 2 nice dolls. And we got very little out of that relationship. They got a tremendous military power, and they still have it today. So, but I believe we will have a very good relationship with China and with a lot of other countries that we're not getting along with too well today. And things are going to straighten out. We're going to get them straightened out very quickly. Very important that we get along with the rest of the world. You know, we have things today called nuclear weapons. I rebuilt our whole military, including our nuclear capability. And so I got very familiar with it. And, you know, I say this often because I had an uncle who was the longest serving, I believe the longest serving, I was told that by MIT. But he was there 39, I guess, or 41 years, longest serving professor in the history of MIT, and nuclear was something he knew a lot about. And we used to talk about it. I'd say, Uncle John, there's no way. He was telling me about this incredible power that was being unleashed potentially. And I say, Uncle John, you could never. And you know what? He was very modest because I've seen the destructive capability. And this world is going to have to get along because if that's ever unleashed, we already have too many countries that have at least remnants of it, some of it. But probably 5 countries, if you think. And Kim Jong-un, when I went to the White House after winning in 2016, I sat with President Obama, which is a ritual. And you sit and you talk. And I said, what's the biggest problem? He said, North Korea is the biggest problem. I don't think it's solvable. I said, have you tried calling him or talking to him? And actually, the answer was yes, and he wasn't responded to. But I did, and we were very safe. It started off a little rocky, if you remember. Little Rocket Man, I called him, and he called me things too. He's got a red button on his desk. I said, I have a bigger red button, and my red button works. I said, and then it started getting a little nicer, and then one day I got a call that they'd like to meet, and it was a great thing. We had a great meeting. We had 2 meetings, actually 2 great meetings, summits, and we had no problem with them. Now they have a problem because they're not liking this administration. They don't respect this administration at all. So we have to get along. We have to get along. We can't have World War III. You're going to end up in World War III. Just like you should have never had Russia go in. It would have never happened if a competent person led us. It would have never happened. He led them into it. And I'm not blaming Biden. But you know what? What he was saying was exactly the wrong thing. I said, we're going to have an invasion because of a lot of the rhetoric. It was stupid rhetoric. But it would have never happened, not only for that reason. Oil was down low. oil was almost at $100 a barrel. So Putin is one of the only people. I mean, nothing's easy in life, but Putin at $100 a barrel, war works. At $40 a barrel, it didn't work at all. So we're going to get back to a intelligently run place, a place where other countries aren't using the word nuclear. That word was never talked about because I knew the power of it. And I talked to Putin about it. I talked to President Xi about it. I think we were going to do, you remember the talk where we were going to reduce nuclear capability substantially. All three of us, we're going to start it, we're going to reduce very substantially. And then we had the election, and after the election, they didn't talk about that or anything else, frankly. But we have to be very, very careful because the destructive capability of nuclear, when people talk about global warming, I say the ocean is going to go down 1/100th of an inch within the next 400 years. That's not our problem. Our problem is nuclear warming, and we better be smart, and we better have smart people at the top that know how to deal, because these people don't know how to deal. Putin came out today, he endorsed Kamala, and I didn't know, was I supposed to call him up and say, thank you very much, I appreciate it. But he endorsed Kamala. I have a feeling, I don't know. I don't know exactly what to say about that. I don't know if I'm insulted or he did me a favor. But we have to get along with the world. We can't have war because the destructive capability, you can be the head of the biggest bank wherever the hell Jamie is sitting. You can be the head of the biggest bank in the world, and a couple of nukes and your bank doesn't mean a thing. You gotta get along. This is such an important job. It's a dangerous job too. Very dangerous job. If you look at statistically, being president is very dangerous. That throbbing feeling I have. Oh, that throbbing feeling. No, it's a very dangerous job, and you have to do it right. And if you don't do it right, bad things will happen to the world. Things like you've never seen before. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Paulson behind me to your right, Mr. President.
Hi, John.
First, let me thank you for your presentation today. President Trump, in the last fiscal year, the fiscal deficit under the Biden administration was approximately $2 trillion. Under the policies you've announced, the deficit would come down from items such as increased revenues from tariffs, as well as eliminating the tax incentives for the Green New Deal. These gains would be mitigated by decreases in revenues from policies such as no tax on tips. Overall, what do you estimate will be the impact of the fiscal deficit from your policies?
Well, we just hit record highs at numbers that nobody ever thought possible. You're right, it's over $2 trillion. Nobody thought that was a number that was, I mean, you could go back 4 years, nobody thought a number like that would be possible. It's crazy, it's just horrible, actually. But yeah, we're $2 trillion, and I view it as profit and loss to a certain extent. A lot of people say, oh, it's trade. You know, you have many people say trade deficits don't matter. I think they matter a lot. We're going to have tremendous growth. What I'm talking about is all about growth. The tax is relatively minor compared to the growth. We're going to make our money back on growth. We're going to also, we're going to grow like nobody's ever grown before. I think if this all works out, you're going to have the auto industry come back to America. Right now, China is building 2 auto factories in Mexico, massive auto factories. And they think they're going to make their cars in Mexico and send them back into the United States with no tax. It's not going to happen. Under this administration, it's going to happen. And they wanted to do that during my administration. I said, if you do it, we're going to put a 200% tariff on every car, and you'll never be able to see it. There will never be one car coming across our border. And if I would have let them do it, we would have had these 2 factories. Well, now they're building massive factories, more than 2, and they're going to kill Detroit. And the head of the union, the United Auto Workers in Detroit, has done a terrible, terrible job, just a terrible job. but we're going to bring tremendous growth back. And remember, we're also taking in a certain percentage. I won't name the percentage today, but it'll be a certain tariff percentage, which will be higher than people had heard in the past. And we will be bringing in billions and billions of dollars, which will directly reduce our deficits. Okay? Thank you very much. Good job you've done, by the way. Very good.
Thank you. And the final question, Resma, is to you.
Thank you. President Trump, you talked about how the increase in the price of food, gas, and rent is hurting families. But the real cost that's breaking families' backs and preventing women from participating in the workforce is childcare. Childcare is now more expensive than rent for working families and is costing the economy more than $122 billion a year, making it one of the most urgent economic issues that is facing our country. In fact, the cost of childcare is outpacing the cost of inflation, with the majority of American families of young children spending more than 20% of their income on childcare. One thing that Democrats and Republicans have in common is that both parties talk a lot about what they're going to do to address the childcare crisis, but neither party has delivered meaningful change. If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be getting in trillions of dollars, and as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you. Very good question. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trump. It's great that you accepted our invitation to be with us today. Thank you, Raj, Sander, John, and Reshma, for your questions. The president is now going to be leaving the building, and so we want to all stay seated while he and his team leave. But as he leaves, let's all say thank you one more time for him accepting our invitation to be here today.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. Just wait on. Thank you. Thank you.